Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Lisa Retamoso. We're going to present on preparing for a TRIO compliance assessment, key steps in digital organization through NEC. This is part of the series of free webinars that we offer completely free of charge, just to get the information out there, give you a chance to also have a recording in case you want to listen to it later, share it with your additional staff or someone that you've designated as taking the lead on this project. Again, my name is Lisa Retamoso. I've been in TRIO 30 years. If you had told me that 30 years ago, I would have fallen down on the floor laughing or crying, saying there's no way. But here I am, got sucked in and I love it. Started with pre-college programs in Fort Worth, did that for about 11 years as a director. And that's where I went through 2 of my compliance assessments. And then moved on to UTSA, where I was associate director there and had another one there. And then just by accident became a TRIO consultant for the last 20 years. So I'm still 100% time and effort TRIO. It's just I work for a variety of different agencies and colleges and universities across the country. Started my own company called Nosotros Education Center. Obviously, you know who we are because you're attending this webinar. Just to let you know, these are the services that we provide through Nosotros Education Center. We're here to get folks funded and to keep them funded. The majority of our services here are allowable cost. Of course, the last 3, proposal development and technical reviews, proposal need data review, technical assistance, and proposal writing workshops. We're fixing to get into talent search. Those you cannot pay for out of grant funds, but everything else listed here are allowable costs and also can be, you could use part of your carryover funds. So again, just letting you know what services we provide. Today's session, we'll talk about compliance assessments. And it's something that you can do yourself. You don't have to pay anybody to do it for you. You can go ahead and do it internally if money is tight, like with EOC and Talent Search, I Know It, or all the programs. So we're going to offer this service as something that you can take and actually implement. If you happen to have carryover, if you're interested in getting someone like us to kind of gently bug you and nudge you to get it done, because a lot of times that's what it takes, right? Getting someone to kind of put deadlines and work with you, yet be flexible enough. Everyone is capable of getting their stuff on track. The question is, other things get in the way. So if you need someone to kind of help you get organized and assist you in this process, we're here for you, okay? But let's say you want to do this on your own. This is completely stuff you can take away and implement immediately. You don't need to have us working with you, but we would be more than happy to. It's one of the things that we do. You should have access to a Google Drive. Okay, we put it in the chat, but also here's the link. In the Google Drive, you will see this presentation. Also, you will see a checklist for most of the TRIO programs that you can utilize. There's also a coupon code for those of you that decide that, you know what, I know I could do it, but I kind of need someone to, project management, let's use as an example. Also, we can help you develop forms, policies, procedures. If you're missing something, we got it here. And we can, from this point forward, put those things in place for you. There's a coupon code in there as well for 20% off. And if you can go to our website on the NEC shop page, if you're interested in more information about getting the individual technical assistance and helping you get up and running, okay? So you decide, I don't know, if you're a brand new program or recently started, if you want to do a compliance assessment just to see where you're at right now before you take over, as you're taking over, or you've been in place for a while and you get that feeling, right? When you have a minute in between, dealing with, programming, students' issues, agency, university issues, you kind of get a sense of, you know what, I think our stuff's all over the place, and then something happens and you get distracted and you move on, but then it comes back to that, if this is a great time to get that up and going. I know people say, well, I'm busy, this is beginning of school year, all this other stuff. Well, again, this is where getting someone or us or somebody else, there's other vendors to help you kind of do the heavy lifting for you would be sometimes a good investment as well. All right. So compliance assessments, let's talk about those briefly. I mean, the what they are, and then we'll get into the details of what should consist of a comprehensive compliance assessment. We used to talk about them as site visits or monitoring reviews back in the day, back in the 90s when I started. The main thing, obviously, is it deals with compliance with applicable laws, regulations, and policies. They're focused more on programmatic issues than fiscal issues, and they're supposed to be set up to provide feedback to grantees and collect information for the Department of Ed. Okay. They're supposed to be, we're not out to get you. They're supposed to be a way to, initially they're focused on new grantees, getting them up and running. But, we have so many programs and not enough staff. And so they've turned into something where, okay, something's got to be wrong for us to get a compliance assessment. Not necessarily so, but when you don't have enough time to just do it randomly, sometimes there's certain triggers that may cause y'all to go up to the top of the list. And some of them are if you've got multiple TRIO programs out of the same institution, under the same PI or department. Also, if there's on your budget, if the department sees that there hasn't been a lot of drawing down of funds, that could be a trigger as well. Okay, so there's certain triggers there that I guess might push you up to the top of the list. It could be conducted by someone from the department, from the TRIO office, or representative, or contracted to an outside agency. Okay, so they're short and sweet. They don't last very long. Usually the reviewers have some knowledge of TRIO programs and specific regulations, usually. But if in case they don't, that's where you need to, and then you need to organize your documents following that lead, and very nicely have those documents ready so that you can show to the reviewers. And in a gentle way, if you notice that that person or entity that comes to do the compliance assessment may not be full-time TRIO and not get it, that you have those regulations handy and you organize your documents so that it's easier for them to find things and you won't have to do a lot of back and forth. Compliance assessments should focus on monitoring on program performance and providing technical assistance. That's what it should be. But again, the trigger usually is something, well, something's not being spent, money's not being spent, or there's a bunch of programs there, we can go there. Sometimes it's because another program at another institution nearby, there's something going on where they might have to go and actually, which True Life Example shut down a program in Dallas. So they thought they just on a Thursday called the programs in Fort Worth saying, well, we're going to be in Dallas anyway, so we'll just come see y'all in Fort Worth, right? Dallas, Fort Worth, right? No big deal. It is a big deal. But got a call on Thursday saying they'd be there on Monday through no fault of the program, but just because they wanted to, they're actually coming in to shut down a talent search. So they thought they'd go visit an Upward Bound. And there was a trigger at that Upward Bound. The trigger was that their institution had not done a drawdown in 9 months from the G5, G6 system. So they were like, what the heck's going on? Again, here's a reminder. This is what you should have available, from Edgar 75731, records related to compliance, that you need to keep records to show its compliance with program requirements and performance, to determine progress in accomplishing project objectives. And they used to let us revise the objectives back in the day. Now we can't really get revisions of objectives. But basically, here's the regulations to say you must maintain records related to compliance and performance. Now, each individual TRIO program does have their own set of records that must be maintained. A little modification later on in this presentation. I'll share a slide with you that basically does a generic overview of what things should be in a participant file, because we get that question all the time. Okay. All right, so the first thing that's looked at in a compliance assessment, and this is again through a collection and conversation with other directors and folks that have gone through this Unless they do a major revamping, it appears that they look at the administrative, one of the components is administrative documents. For example, your proposal, your technical review forms. People are like, what are those? Those are like the score sheets from the readers that read your proposal way back when. Those are something they want to also see that you have on hand. Also, for those of you, they're very helpful as well when you're getting ready to write for a talent search or any proposal, to see what the scores were from the readers in the comments. Okay. Your competitive preference priorities, those are things that need to be also that were separate from the proposal there. It deals with project management, the structure, staffing, quality of personnel. Direct Department of Ed correspondence also reviewed to determine compliance with applicable TRIO program laws, regulations, and policies. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen okay. On the right slide. Thank you. I think so, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Sometimes I started thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not on the right slide and no one is telling me. On this administrative checklist, and you do have a version of this in the Google Drive if you prefer to see it in that manner, in that format. In the administrative folder, now you could do a couple things. You could go old school and have a binder, big 3-ring binder, massive binder that has this as its table of contents, so to speak. And this could be the administrative folder or binder that has sections for all these documents. You could do it that way, or you could do that like we're encouraging most of our clients to do, is we do it virtually or electronic, digital format, either in Teams or in Google Drive that's secure, or I think that SharePoint, that might be the same as Teams. Some people do it in Dropbox. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's say just, you're doing it just paper, which some folks prefer to do, which is perfectly fine. And you would have the hard copy, documents, the proposal, the competitive preference priorities, just technical review forms, letters of commitment. And this, what we mean by letters of commitment, and I need to modify that to give you a little bit more information. We look at the proposal in the applicant and community support section, or the applicant support section, depending on what TRIO program you're with. And in that section, we were told, and we told folks, look, in order to get full points, you better tell the readers that you have letters of commitment from your college president and or the different departments on campus. If you're a pre-college program, you better say that you have letters of commitment from the target schools and agencies, right? Remember that way back when? Well, if it says it that if that is stated in your proposal, then we look for those. They need to be in section 2 of the administrative folder, a PDF of all those letters of commitment. You weren't supposed to send them with the proposal, but you put a statement that these letters will be stored or filed in the director's office or grants and contracts office. Well, now's the time for us to be looking for it, okay? Direct Department of Ed correspondence for each year. So for each year, there should be a different section. For year 1, any direct correspondence with your program officer or anybody representing themselves from the Department of Ed, when it deals specifically to questions about personnel or budget with your project, not the generic blast emails that go out to all the Upward Bounds or all the EOC programs, but that direct correspondence, emails, PDFs of emails divided by year. And what we look for specifically is if we know, and we pretty much find out very quickly during the conversation, oh, I'm the new director here. So that already tells me, well, I need to find out in folder number 3, where was the request from the college or agency requesting that the department approve the new director, and where was the approval? So that's an example. Or when we find out, oh yeah, we had a lot of carryover, and we got it approved, then I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to look for, the approval of that carryover. Think about it. There usually is not a lot of direct correspondence between you and your assigned program officer on a daily or weekly basis. There may be exceptions to the rule if for some reason you're placed or the discussion is that, you know what, I want you to check in with me more often or whatever. So that's understandable. But usually there's not a lot of emails to collect here, but the few are very important and they need to be saved and they need to be ready to be produced, you know, during a compliance assessment. The project's organizational chart with percentage of time and effort. No personal names on this, but it should be your current org chart with the time and effort, even if everyone is 100% time and effort. Then we've got the project's full-time staff listing for each year. So for each year, there should be a listing of the name of the person that was in that position, the title, and you know, divided by year. Job descriptions and resumes for all full-time staff. Okay, that could be for everyone who was a full-time staff during the period of time, the 5 years. And again, each one of these folders, think about it, that it's like a yearbook for all 5 years. So it's not a yearbook, but it's a funding book for the whole 1 5-year time period. And so the idea is when you go into the next funding cycle, you start all over again, okay, with a new book, a new folder with this information here. Staff travel divided by year. We just need purpose, dates, locations. That can be on a Word document. We're not looking for the receipts here or sign-in sheets here or receipts here. That's in the last fiscal folder, if anything. And then a link to or a screenshot or a printout of a PDF of the screenshot or the link to your college or your agency's policies and procedures. And that's just to make sure that your project is funded by an entity, that the grantee has in place a structured, above and beyond your project's policies, procedures, has a set of structured policies and procedures that they're in place. It's not just fly-by-night agency or a college that just started up just to do TRIO. They've got some things in place whether TRIO is there or not. So just the link there. And that's what TOC, table of contents, means. We don't need the whole thing, just the link or the table of contents. And then interestingly enough, staff meeting agendas and meetings for years 1 through 5. That consistently popped up. When I first saw that on one checklist, I thought, well, that's just one person wanting it. But then when it showed up on everyone else's checklist, I mean, there was some other stuff that wasn't consistent, but all of them mentioned staff meeting agenda and minutes for years 1 through 5. So there's a difference between agenda and minutes, y'all, though. Okay, a lot of us are good about having an agenda, but maybe we're not doing great about having separate minutes for each meeting. Some people meet once a week officially, once a month. That's fine. And if you think about it, you could almost have the same agenda with different dates. I mean, a generic agenda, new business, old business, you know, that stuff. But then it's the minutes that you should really have that are different, right? And so I've seen some where it was hard to tell what really happened because they were just like, is this part of the agenda or the minutes of the meeting? And so that can also be very helpful now. And there's many devices now that even if you're meeting with people now in person in your you know, office, that you can have a recorder going on that will, you know, transcribe it and then put it into a Word document. So you don't have to, you know, worry about picking on some poor person to take the notes and not being able to concentrate on the meeting. Right. So let me move on to the next folder. Let me see how much time we have left. Okay. The second folder is documentation and programming. So this is the one that kind of takes up the most of the time and gets, I believe, updated more often than the previous folder. So this is constantly being updated. Now we're looking at your projects, policies, procedures, activity timelines, and calendars for each year, description of services, curriculum, workshop offered, participant forms, like blank master copies of forms. And then also we start looking at student files to see eligibility, services provided, and their individual achievement on project objectives. So this is the one that takes us the most time, okay? But the good news is that you should have this information. It's just, where is it? Nothing should have to be developed. And that's the same with all these documents. And if we should have them somewhere. And if we can't find them, then just say you can't find it. So when you go back on the first folder and you cannot find your technical review form, and you spend a little time looking for it internally, yes, you could see if you could ask the program officer if they have it. You probably don't want to ask once once everyone's writing for the proposal, because they're super busy. So you might want to ask now, if it's upward bound, talent search, maybe that hasn't come out yet. But let's say you can't find it and you don't want to bother with it, then you just put in a PDF form or type something up and saying this is missing. We'll do a better job next time, or we've set the following procedures in place so that from this point forward, we will always have them. And that's the same for any of these things. If for some reason you're missing something because it hasn't been done or it can't be found, then say so. Say so. And if it hasn't been done yet, say we're working on this, we'll have it done, or we can't find it for year 1 and 2, but moving forward for years 3, 4, and 5, we definitely will go ahead and take care of it. Okay. The worst thing is to not address it at all, because then we look at it and we're like, well, there's nothing here. What's up with that? Oh, we couldn't find it. Well, then tell me you couldn't find it, and tell me what you've put into place from this point forward, so that you have something for years 3 and 4. Okay. Will that fly in a real life compliance assessment? Well, if you don't have it, you don't have it. But at least you bring it to their attention, and you also go ahead and have shown that you have a plan in place that, number one, I know it's missing and I know that it shouldn't be missing, but this is what we're going to do in the future to make sure it doesn't go missing from this point forward. Okay. So, they can still write you up, but at least they won't have to write up as much, because they could say, well, the grantee understands and has a plan in place already. Okay. That saves a lot of back and forth as well. So projects, policies, procedures manual. Don't worry if it's not done. Hey, here's a tip. It should never be done. Your policies, procedures manual should be constantly growing, being revised, updated. Don't put it in Word or PDF, because you'll always be updating it. Put it in something like Teams, digital, so you can always have it updated. So it doesn't have to be, even if you haven't started working on it yet, just put the latest version, a link to it, or if it's a PDF, and just, when it was last updated and what's your plan to update it. And like I said, go digital. It's a heck of a lot easier. And it will, that's our next webinar next week, that we can talk about how you can keep it current. Activity and timeline schedule. Everyone's got, I call it an activity timeline. You may call it a schedule or a calendar, but for each year, there should be a calendar or schedule of when you all were going to provide services or workshops. Okay, so everyone has had to do this to let their students at the college or their students and their parents know when things will be held. So I know you have some variation of this. Everyone has it. Now we're just asking you, we're telling you should organize it by year. What about your latest version of your curriculum that you're utilizing for tutoring, for financial literacy, and also your workshop descriptions, the vendors that you're using, just keep that updated. Again, this is something we should have already. Maybe it's filed somewhere else or all over the place, but this kind of forces you to put it together in one document. Updated as of this fall 2024. This is our latest, when we do tutoring, this is the curriculum that we utilize. We do instruction. This is what we cover, is it based on state assessment or some sort of testing, advanced placement, or for the college level, their financial literacy, their career, their transfer workshops. Are you using, was it Dreamcatcher? Or you using innovative educators, and they sometimes do the work for you. They've got the workshop title and the description, even if you upload their flyers. Again, get your vendors to provide you with a detailed curriculum and just upload that. And this is our curriculum. And again, it should be the latest version. So none of us have said, we're going to use one vendor completely. We use a variety of vendors. So put them all there. Student travel, again, that's very similar to staff travel. We're not asking for any names at this point or sign-in sheets, just a document per year that states the dates, the locations, the purpose, and number of attending. By the way, on the staff travel, it's actually staff travel and professional development. So for those of you that have, your staff has attended virtual trainings, that should also be listed, even though they didn't actually travel. So you just put virtual on that. The same thing here, if you have any student travel or events that happen virtually, you could add them here, but they focus really on the student travel because we're going to look at the receipts in the later folder to see how they match up. For those of you that do have a stipend policies and procedures, whether it's grant aid, the research internship, what's the policies and procedures, not just the regulations, but if it's applicable, how you all decide to award those upward bound, SSS, grant aid. Besides the regulatory language, yes, that's good to have there, that to let somebody know you understand. That's just the, who's eligible, but then you select, who gets the research internship, that amount. You guys have some additional besides just being the eligibility, and also the distribution of it. Also, EOCs and talent search during this 5-year funding cycle, some of y'all were allowed to issue meal cards and gas cards. So what was the procedure for that? What was the policy and what was the procedure? Okay, anytime you're dealing with money, you're gonna have to have, besides this is the bare minimum, how did you select why she got it and he didn't, for example. Then master copies of project and participant forms, just a blank of your intake form, your verification of eligibility and selection, your individual service plan, your blank contact logs or links. And then the last 2 items are separate from the binder. This is where we would look for all your individual and group service contact logs or sign-in sheets for each year. And some of y'all have it digital, where students check in. Or some of us are old school where we have students sign in and you scan those, or you have those sign-in. We used to have them in a separate binder back in the day for talent search. Here are all our service contact logs where the students signed in, and we put it in our database, and then we kept that sheet and we put it in that binder just in case. Now what we would do is scan it, and be able to do that, or now have students log in with some of these database programs. They can sign in digitally, right, virtually, and or through digital, and it's a spreadsheet that's building, right? Instead of the paper sign-in sheet, now you have a spreadsheet that has a timestamp, right, where students signed in. And I don't know if they signed out, but they signed in. That works as well. If you're using a tutoring program or College Board database that can track and give you reports when students logged in and logged off, great, that could be thrown in there. So it's a variety of things, printouts. And again, I'm moving more toward digital because it makes it a lot easier to upload these things. So not one thing, one format is to be expected, because the way we do business now is we got a variety of things that are going on. So that's okay. In fact, it's great. I prefer to see in folder number 7 or online or in a separate folder that there's a combination of good old-fashioned sign-in sheets, paper, good old-fashioned service contact logs mixed in with spreadsheets, good. And then we randomly select from any one of the 5 years, 5 students off of, we asked for a listing of students that were served in a certain year. Then we pick like 5 files, for example. And then we say, okay, we need to see these files. And if you do it digital, there's a way we tell you exactly what scanned documents we want uploaded to check that out. And the next slide here kind of tells you what should be in each student's file. It's generic, in the sense that, of course, it would be fine-tuned for each individual TRIO program. But just as an overall, the big thing is about eligibility. Isn't that crazy? You spend, I would say 75% of what we're looking for in each student's individual file. Okay, I'm sorry, we have, someone needs to mute themselves.
I'll make us a flow chart in
Hello,
Visio.
Halen. Hi, can you mute yourself?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. So again, starting on the review participants files on, it's 75% of what we're looking for in each student's individual file would be documentation of eligibility. What do you have there to show that they were even eligible for the program? And only 25% is about, did they get enough services every year that they were in the program? And did every year, if you say they met an objective, because we also look to see what a listing of students that met each objective, well, then we're supposed to be able to go back into the student's file to see proof of that educational progress and objective met. And if they were in another TRIO program or another federal program, this is if applicable to the extent practical, is there some documentation to show what services they received from another TRIO or federal program? Okay. So this is what we would say, or what they would look for specifically. The contracts, the report cards that they give you every 6 to 9 weeks, the release forms, the summer forms, all those, the report cards from the school, yes, the annual, like an annual transcript or annual, even if it's unofficial report card that shows ending GPA, yes. But all those other documents that we're collecting, collect them, but make sure that these rise to the very top. Make sure that these actually are the one. What I'm saying is we have more forms in the files than what anyone would be looking for compliance assessment, but sometimes we're missing the few files or forms that we're missing the few forms that are actually needed. Okay. Don't throw anything away. Keep it in there, but just organize it so that it reads like this, like the very first tab, or right away, they should be able to see documentation of eligibility. The second thing, record of service delivery. Then educational progress. And then last but not least, services provided, if any. Then you can put all the other stuff that you want to keep. Documents of workshops provided, copies. I mean, that's fine. But sometimes we organize files for us and don't realize that we need to organize them in the way an outsider would need to come and see your files right away. And a good review of a proposal means high points, or a quick review of your proposal means high points, but a quick review of your files as well could also indicate that everything's in order, easy to find, easy to see. Okay. And again, there's a way to do this digital, by scanning just these documents. I prefer the digital because it actually cuts out on a lot of the items that I would typically have to go hunting to find these things. I would get files full of paper and they weren't in any order, or I'd have to dig to the very bottom to finally get documentation of eligibility, which should have been the first thing I was given on a silver platter, so to speak. Okay. So let's move on. Let me see here. Okay, moving on to the third folder, reporting and evaluation. So this is where you want to file or keep a copy of your final APRs are submitted that include your prior experience reports, plus any formative. Now, summative is the APR and evaluation reports, things like that. Formative, fancy word for monthly reports. There is no way you could not have gotten funded, or you might have lost a point in your evaluation plan if you did not mention how you monitor participant and program progress during the year. And a lot of us said our databases would give us monthly reports. So when we do a compliance assessment, we look at, well, the main areas we look at are quality of personnel to see what was written in the grant, so we can go back and look at the job descriptions and the resumes to see if they match. The other thing we look at is applicant and community support and the proposal to see who you all said you were going to get letters of commitment from and would have on file. We go back and check. And then we also look at the evaluation section. If y'all mention monthly reports, if y'all mention end of semester or end of year surveys of parents and students, then we're like, okay, you said it here. So now we're asking to see the results. We don't actually come in and do the evaluation for you, but we're looking at results. So we kind of go back and look at those three main areas, almost more so than the actual plan of operation. because we all have to do the same services and activities. If you're, McNair, SSS, you've got your set. So we make sure to look for those required services being provided through your activity services or schedule of services in your workshop curriculum. We can see that. But where we find where most folks forget to make the connection is when the quality of personnel is not matching the resumes or job descriptions, where the applicant community support section is talking about all these letters of commitments and MOUs, and we don't see them. And then in the evaluation plan, where they said they would do all these monthly reports and evaluations, but we don't see them in the folders. Okay, so here's another way you can organize this folder on evaluation and reporting in these areas here. Your APRs divided by year, and that would include your prior experience reports. They're attached to the very end of your PDF. Listing of participants served in each one of these years. This is where we randomly, through all the years, decide which year to say, okay, I'm going to pick 5 students from this year, and these are the 5 that I need you to upload, the following documents from their files so we can check them out. A listing of participants meeting objectives in years 1 through 5. Now, for those of you using databases to create your APRs, your databases should be able to give you this. This is something you should do when you are submitting your APR to the Department of Ed. Internally, you should print out a listing from your database of students that have met that objective. Makes life a lot easier than trying to do it separately. So if you haven't done it before, might want to catch up on this and just make it a plan that moving forward, that this is something that you go ahead and file right away, or once a year at least. Then any monthly reports for years 1 through 5 per your evaluation plan. Okay. And then again, if applicable, did you talk about doing participant, project staff, campus department evaluations, parents, surveys, if applicable, and again, to have a comprehensive plan, it should have been included in the grant. Should have been. Maybe you got full points and it wasn't mentioned. Okay, then we're not going to hold you accountable. And we may say we recommend it, moving forward. That might cost you a point later on. But so we kind of go back by your proposal that kind of takes the lead in these areas here, especially in this folder. What if you've had any prior external evaluation reports? Now, again, this is a compliance assessment that looks at compliance. You're either in compliance or not. An evaluation, external evaluation, is more based on a SWOT analysis, an assessment, a subjective assessment of how you are operating your program. A lot of recommendations and an external evaluation. Very rarely do they come up with a finding, because their purpose is not so much to see if you're in compliance or out of compliance, but more to see the quality of programming, how you're getting the results you're getting, how you can improve upon that. So if you have any of those in place, then that's where we would look for those. And then if you had any prior compliance assessment reports, either through, internally, or you hired someone like NEC, or you had a state or college come in and to do that, that would be there as well. Okay. And then last but not least, fiscal operations here, dealing with receipts, things like that. The majority of items in this folder, you actually will have to get from another department on campus. Grants and contracts or your business office, but you should have your GAND, right? Your grant award notices for each year. Here's also where we ask to see your approved budgets and carryover spending plans for each year. Time and effort forms for each year. Okay, time and effort forms are a big deal. There's no set format. It's whatever your institution has in place. Okay, is it monthly? Is it once a year? Is it quarterly, where they have you sign that a certain percentage, even if it's 100% time and effort? It should be there, and it should be divided, okay? Meaning that if you've got multiple TRIO programs, all the compliance assessments occur per TRIO program. So I once had a client that they had so many TRIO programs and they had just one report and it was all mixed up. I said, y'all need to run this just for UB1 versus UB2. UB1, yes, goes in the UB1 folder under number 3. UB2, you just can't have them listed on each other's. I mean, they could be, but not for this example or for this display point of view. It needs to be completely separate. Okay, even though it may be collected all together, it must be a way to separate that. Then documentation of drawdown funds for each year. How do you know, or how do they tell you? When are you told, or when are you informed? Is it monthly? Is it quarterly? Heck, when I worked at the Boys and Girls Club, we were downloading drawdowning of funds every 3 days because we had no float. I mentioned to you when we started this presentation that I also had a college that had drawn down in 9 months, you know, just living off the float. That's a big deal, number 4, because that could trigger a compliance assessment if they don't see money being drawn down and you are just operating and doing your thing and you had no idea. So find out who does it on your campus, how often it happens, and can you get an email response? You don't actually have to see the report, but can someone let you know that that's going on, and what's the policy for it? And if there's not one, can you suggest a policy that it's drawn down every other month or every quarter at least? And how can you get notification? And so that's what that would be there. What about your agencies or institutions' fiscal policies and procedures for fund expenditures? Table of contents only, either a link to that section or a printout that shows the agency, your college has a set policies and procedures dealing with the fund distribution is very, very important, just to make sure, just like in the first folder, to make sure that your TRIO program is being hosted by an entity that has a structure in place for policies, procedures that are above and beyond the project is very important. Number 6, the project's internal budget management system. How do you all, when you go to buy your annual project database subscription or attend one of our professional development seminars, what's the process to purchase that item? What's the policy, or what's the internal management budget plan? Are you tracking internally on Excel or QuickBooks for nonprofits, which I do recommend, in addition to checking and reconciling with the institution's budget once a month, or I don't know, every other week or something like that, or quarterly? You know, that needs to be, you know, it should, a summary of it is in your proposal, but the details should be clearly listed on a document. You know, it doesn't have to be long or detailed, but it should be stated and put in writing. And then finally, separate is like the participant files, picking on a year and a couple of months to ask, you know what, for example, Upward Bound, we'd like to see your receipts for the months of May and June. And you know what, you know, that is, and I could say related to travel and meals. You be very specific. You never know. It's a spot check. It's a spot check. So this is where possibly doing digital is easier, because we could say, here's a folder. Please scan and provide us with the receipts, expenditures and receipts for the months of June and July of you know, summer of 2024. And we could say, you know what, for travel or student supplies or something like that, we could pick. You never know. You just have to be ready. So I'm sure you all have some way, either, you know, definitely internally, I don't know if it's hard copy or digital, where if you had to, you could produce that information. It's not a complete audit, but it should, you know, when you're asked for a specific month of receipts, it hasn't happened to us yet. People have always said, oh yes, I can get that for you. And so that lets me know, you know what, just letting you know that they could go back, you know, to the first year, the second year, and they could ask to see 3 or 4 more categories. But in this case, we're doing a spot check. If an issue should arise, then we would recommend, let's expand this and look at the other months. Inventory of non-consumable supplies, technology, furniture, equipment, both project and institution or agency provided. So not just the items that you've purchased with project funds, but also items that have been donated to you, like furniture or other items. That's real important to have. If you have any rental or lease agreements or contracts, consultant scope of work performed if applicable, your agencies or institutions indirect cost agreement, that is something you'll have to get from your business office. If you do give out grant aid or student stipends or research, documentation of disbursement for each year, and this may be in a separate folder where you have it, and that's a big deal. Anytime you're giving out money, there's got to be a way. Not only earlier we said what was your policies, procedures in order to distribute. So here it is documentation that's it got into the student's account somehow. It used to be back in the day sign-in sheets when kids would sign in, you give them a check or cash. Remember those days? How are y'all showing, or what's the documentation to show that students received, which students received it, and how they received it? And then some sort of verification that the agency or institution has conducted. We don't need to see the whole thing because it's hundreds of pages long, but something like, usually people upload just the cover sheet stating or from the institution's website that the institution or agency has completed their required single audit for the year of blah, 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 and that there were no critical findings, okay? And something that's something you usually don't have handy, but you should know where to go to get it, okay? All right, so just to wrap things up, these are the official ratings of the standard areas reviewed. I will tell you, we give a lot of recommendations, and we also give effective, like that's a great, system there you got going on. I love that budget management system, or I love the way your files are organized, so we would do that. But honestly, the 3 times I've had a compliance assessment, it's either required action, that you're out of compliance and must perform a corrective action to comply, which happened to me when I was using ranges of income for talent search, when I was asking parents to select taxable taxable income from the TRIO chart. And I thought I was doing great because someone else was doing it, and they got it from somebody else. But then I got my compliance assessment. They said, no, you need to go back and fix this and get an actual dollar amount, because at best you're getting estimated, and the regulation doesn't say estimated taxable income. So yikes, I had to do that all over again for talent search. Or you're compliant, everything's great. And that's what we try to do when we work with our clients. Initially, you may be not in compliant. It's a required action, but then we work with you to get you in compliance so that the final report is saying, hey, we got a bunch of green and a little bit of red, and some of the red we won't be able to go back and fix, but moving forward, it's something that you want to think about being proactive. And here's a plan so that it never happens again. Okay. Just as a reminder, electronic storage of information through the Uniform Guidance 200-336, they're encouraging you to go electronic, but you need to adhere to whatever your agency or policy has or rules. And also as a director, you may choose to, have a hybrid approach. I'm old school. I like having my good old fashioned hard copy files of students, at least my current active participants. I want to have the files. And yes, we might as well also have a digital copy. You never know, something could happen, God forbid, but we'll have the digital copy. Or you could go full force and be digital. But here is the regulation. People ask about it a lot. Check in with your institution. Here's where we go into the electronic portion. I was sharing with you, how we used to do in binders, divided 4 big binders in different sections. But now we're moving on to using either Dropbox, Teams is real fun now, or Google Drive. And you could have this internal, but whatever you do, if you're going to have this internal, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to create these 4 folders, great. But also make sure there's a way, if you had to share it with the department or someone on the outside, does the structure or the format the platform you select internally, is there a way to share that to somebody temporarily as a guest? And Teams seems to do that very well. Yes, I think you can do it with Dropbox, but just make sure it falls under all the compliant, the regulatory language that your institution would require, like IT as well. But then also you want to make sure that it's in a situation, it's where you could possibly share that information. Okay. So just to show you, here's the way it could be broken down. And this is in the administrative folder. And these would be the subfolders that we were talking about earlier. And then within those, here's a project activity timeline we said needed to be divided by year. And here would be each year for each one of that each year's activity timeline. Okay. And then another checking in under reporting and evaluation, formative reports. This is the type of reports. They have a contact summary overall report, which is like a demographic report. They would run once a month. And then they would also have one on services. So they have that listed there. So it depends. Call it what you call it. What's your monthly report? And then fiscal operations here. They would have all these, and you click each folder, and that's what that document would be. Some of these you just have to update once every 5 years. Some of them will have to be annual. Okay. I do want to show you one quick thing, a report here. Bear with me. I'm going to close this out and share a sample report. This is the informal report, for example. All I did was I took the same PDF that is in the Google Drive and the same checklist that you can use to organize, whether you're using paper or binders versus digital folders. The same way you organize it is the same way we start reviewing. Now, we do have a fancier spreadsheet that we can put it on to have a more formal looking report. But we found that this is very helpful back and forth to use as a working document. You see what's missing, and then we decide, you know what, if it's always going to stay missing, then we need to go ahead and say, this is going to be missing until the next funding cycle. Okay, we'll upload a PDF digital in that folder or a printout to put in the hard copy binder that says, stop looking, this is missing. We also chat and keep a, running record here. You notice everything in green is cool, good to go. And then we might put our suggestions, recommendations in here. So just to show you. And then when we review the files, lets you know what's missing, and then go back and forth. Sometimes clients are able to find the missing documentation, or they misunderstood the request and are able to find the appropriate documents, and we get that taken care of. But it lets you know, or sometimes this file stays not in compliance. And then it lets them know, you know what, we got to check all our other files just to let us know what's missing, so we actually know what's missing. But moving forward with any new student's file, we're going to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And so we just use the same checklist to stay on top of things and say what's missing. Sometimes we have year one is in compliance, but year two, we're unable to find it, or year three is missing. And we go back and forth. It usually takes something like 6 to 8 weeks to do it, but we prefer to do it that way rather than to do it in 2 or 3 days. Okay. But again, this is all something that can be something that you all can do. You don't have to pay anybody to do it. But if you want someone to help you through the process, get you started, either hard copy old school or digital, let us know. You do have in the Google Drive also, there's a 20% off coupon off the service if you're interested in that. I don't know if we had any questions, Donna. Let's see any.
Yes, I think there are some questions.
Okay. Let me see if I can. Yes, I see them now, I think.
Can
MOU suffice as a letter of support. Yes, it does. For proof of objective met for students who transferred, should we have a printout from Clearinghouse in their individual file? Yes, or a digital copy. Yes, or you could have, they could screenshot you their schedule. They could text you a picture of their student ID at the other school. So there's a variety of different ways. I would think the printout from Clearinghouse would be the easiest to get, but you could use a screenshot, or they could forward you their class schedule or their course schedule at that new place at the school they transferred. May the educational progress and objectives met documentation be housed in a separate digital format? If we use case management eligibility, but other items in the school-wide system like colleague detail houses all student records, including his degrees, is this okay? I get what you're saying, that you have proof of that, but it's sitting in another platform. You might want to put a note to yourself that that's sitting in another platform, but when you get the email, or when the real deal comes to look for it, you should do a digital copy or do a screenshot of that documentation and transfer it over for those students they're wanting to see the file. You see what I'm saying? You don't want them to have to keep going back between 2 places. If that makes any sense. That might be a practice you might want to start from this point forward, is to make a screenshot and put a copy of it internally in this, so you're ready to go anyway. Or you could wait until you find out which students need to be looked at, and then you can do it one at a time. But don't have them go to different platforms if you can. If we have seasoned staff like tutors, do they need to be included in the current staff listing? I would include your tutors in the current staff listing. Yes. Would I require resumes and job descriptions for all of them? No, just the generic job description. Okay. What if you're a new director? Are you held responsible for all 5 years? You know what? It's not you, whether you're an old director or a new director. To the department, it's the grant, it's the college or agency that's responsible. What we have done and we have brought, we work with a lot of new directors. If anything, to do kind of like, this is kind of a needs assessment, like, okay, how were things when you took over, and what we can do to get you back on track, whether it's great or it needs to get back on track. The agency and the grantee is responsible. You as a new director are not personally responsible. But it would be the grantee, so they would be looking for the stuff. So if we don't have it, I tell people, let's say we don't have it. Let's state a reason why we think we don't have it, but most importantly, what's our plan to make sure it never happens again? How do we receive the scoring sheets or rubric when the department had reviewed and awarded us as a grant? They should have sent it to your president's office, your grants and contracts office, or what you can do is also request it from your program officer. Are there any privacy laws that prohibit uploading certain student information online? You need to check with your institution. There's not, there's FERPA and things like that, but when students sign also, you might have them sign and let them know that the department may be looking at their information. And again, a lot of times, even if we pick the names, then they go in as student number 1, student number 2, student number 3, and we focus on the eligibility criteria, so to speak. And again, the platform needs to be, that's why we request that we're guests of your team's platform instead of putting them on a separate platform, so to speak. We don't want them or all that information to be on our teams. It's on your, whatever you have it, and then you invite, and it doesn't have to be us, but it could be the department that you invite in to do this virtually, because they're starting to do those, they're finding out that those are cost effective to do it that way, and less of, travel, things like that. How do you document emails? Well, you can always do a PDF of the emails to the department, right? When you email them, and there's a way in Word or Outlook, you could save those emails and then you can make them a PDF and you could put them that way. And again, there shouldn't be a ton of emails between you and the department. Is there any limit to how many years back we can get an audit? Well, it should, not really, no. But most of the time it's within this current funding cycle. But if the funding cycle just started, they may go back to the previous funding cycle. So that's why as soon as you find out, and again, it should be a compliance assessment. With an audit, yeah, all hands are off. It depends on what the issue is with an audit. When you get an audit through the Department of Ed, it's gone beyond the compliance assessment. So you would have had a clue. But on a compliance assessment, we usually do it for the year that just ended. They could go up to the first year of the first funding cycle, or they could for some reason, but then it becomes kind of like an audit. Is the institutional responsible to cover the remaining position percentages to reach 100% for personnel that is doing a percentage for the grant? For example, 80% grant share, expecting 20% covered by the institution. Is the institution responsible to cover the remaining portion to reach? I guess that may be talking about salary wise. Is that time and effort, or is that funding? Like grant share to me looks like 20% of the salary. If that's what was said, they need to provide documentation of that. Email me, Donna, can you put my email address, if you don't mind, in the chat, and we can talk about that offline. I want to make sure I understand the question. If we're starting this from scratch, should we start with 2020 or the current year moving forward? Great question. I would start from this current funding cycle. Even if you don't have anything for year 1 or 2, I'm not sure which project you're with, but let's say you're a talent search, and for some reason you don't have anything for the first 2 years, at least have the folders there. SSS. Okay, so 2020 was the first year of the current funding cycle, I believe. So start with that. Okay. I can't tell you that if it's an audit, that they won't go back further than that. But whatever current funding cycle you're in right now, that's where you should start. And if you want to start from this year moving forward, fine. But of course, you've got some of the pieces, like you have your proposal and some things. So gather what you can, but focus possibly on this year, getting everything up and running so that eventually, as you move on, you'll be able to be completely, having everything. So if you don't want to go back in time, fine, but at least be aware of what you should have had and what you can collect. How diligent do we need to be with supplies between two UB grants? You need to separate everything. Yes, I've been there. When I had 3 Upward Bounds and 2 talent search programs. And in fact, that's where they got me. The more programs that you have where staff are split, supplies are split, and students are signing in on the same sign-in sheet, that's where they got me. They were like, nope. I said, but I'm paying the teacher separately. He told me you need to have these students signing in on 2 different sheets. They cannot be on the same sheet. Even if I highlight, nope. Well, you don't need to do separate cabinets for even pencils. Those are pens and pencils are consumable. It would be those non-consumable supplies, laptops, computers, monitors, things like that. Not pens, pencils, paper clip, paper, stuff like that. And then the salary, yes, on salary, they would need to show their other 20%. If that's the case, when someone's saying about salary, where are those funds coming from? Yes, if they said it was a direct cash contribution, then that's something that they can ask to see. Well, where is that? Okay. All right. I think I got through all the questions. And again, there's a coupon there. You could always email us and ask additional questions. Again, this is something that you can do on your own, but most of us don't have the time to do it. And you can always contact us. There's a coupon there for 20% off. You can check us out on the website to get more information on how we can provide you with that information and get you started if that's something you'd be interested in. We are very flexible on schedule. A real live one would be 2 to 3 days, but what our plan is to work with you over the course of 6 to 8 weeks to get you in place, or at least so you know what's missing or what's there, so that you would be ready to go for an official Department of Ed compliance assessment that would take 2 to 3 days, in person or virtual, but you'll be ready by that time because we would have worked back and forth, had conversations, shown you examples of what's missing, or this is what you need to have, or something like this. And so we may start off with a lot of stuff missing, but our goal is to get as many things into compliance as possible, leaving you with a plan or suggestions on how you can, from this point forward, get back into compliance. Okay. Thanks for joining us. I know we ran over a bit, so sorry to keep you, but let's go ahead and stop the recording. And I hope you found this useful. And